First of all, I think it's really worth thinking about what success means. And I tried to do that a lot in both the books. It's really fun to make other people successful. This is one of the reasons capitalism, I would say, gets a really bad rap and an unfair rap. Like the people I've known who have been successful in the capitalist enterprise, and a lot of them are entrepreneurs, rather than managers, let's say. That's the population I've been exposed to. And this was the same among the professoriate, for that matter. One of the great pleasures the people that I've seen who I respect took was in mentoring. And so don't underestimate the radical satisfaction that's associated with helping other people develop. One of the reasons that good professors, and good businessmen love to be in the position they're in is because they can identify young people who are promising and open up doors of opportunity to them. It's really intrinsically motivating. And so, when you think of capitalism, for example, or success as only a competitive enterprise, that's a real mistake, because there's that aspect of it that's there everywhere, in every enterprise I've ever seen. So success, real success, means you're successful in a way that makes other people around you successful. You need both of those. And that's also really good for your conscience, because then you're not working at the expense of anyone else. Quite the contrary, right? You're lifting the tide that lifts all boats. Maybe you're simultaneously elevating your own relative status, but it's not unreasonable to put that in as a constraining requirement. It has to help other people while it helps you. And I would say the way we're wired, now some people are more selfish than others, but I would still say human beings are unbelievably social and reciprocal. That's built into us at an incredibly deep level. And it can go wrong, and we can get cynical and malevolent and bitter and work at counter purposes to it. But to be of service to your fellow man, your family members, your broader community, there are virtually no pleasures that compete with that. So, and so that's partly why it is useful to do a critique of mere materialism. And materialistic satisfactions are pretty fleeting. They're not non-existent, but they don't have the deep and lasting satisfaction of successful mentoring, for example, and the relationships that build out of that. So I don't think there is any success at all without moral success. In fact, I think that success without moral success is actually a form of torture. If you don't, let's say you don't feel you deserve anything, because you know that you're not being a good person, and that's your own judgment. And let's assume that you're accurate. You're not, because some people will judge themselves far too harshly. But let's just say, you have reasons to have your conscience bothering you, and you're not successful. Well, at least you don't feel the continual injustice of that. You think, well, I'm a son of a bitch, but I don't have anything. But then let's say you're successful. Well, that's all ill-gotten. How can that do any? And then maybe you have to rationalize constantly to live with it. Everything you collect around you is nothing but a source of torment and a constant reminder that you're criminal in your fundamental orientation, that you've ruined people on your mad scramble to the top. Jesus, you don't want that. You seriously don't want that. And no amount of relative material status is going to even come close to rectifying that. You want your conscience to be clear. You want your interpersonal relationships to be honest. You want to be reliable and dependable. And if you can add exciting and adventurous to that, so much the better. But success means, to be successful means to be good. You really are your only comparison group, especially as you get older, because your life is so idiosyncratic and peculiar that look, you have to care what other people think. It's stupid to think otherwise, because you have to be social and you have to be aware of what other people are doing and all of that. So this isn't psychopathic individuality, But it is genuinely true that no one has your set of opportunities and limitations. And so the comparison just isn't real. It can't be sufficiently multidimensional. Because maybe you see someone who's rich. I've met many people who are very, very rich. And you can look at their lives and they have these huge houses and material plenty, and they're shielded from many catastrophes that would hit someone without those resources harder. But their lives are still full of exactly the same troubles that characterize human life in general. And so you compare yourself on one dimension. You don't see, well, the person's worked 80 hours a week for 40 years and it's blown all his relationships out of the water. It's like, yes, he's rich, but he's also old now. He's 60. And one of the best predictors of wealth is age. Really, do you want to be young and poor or old and rich? It's like, I'd pick young and poor because you can't buy youth. And so, and that's something that's worth considering. But you don't know what burdens the people you're jealous of are carrying. So leave it be. It's not helpful to you to be envious. Who knows what price you pay for hyperspecialization? And I learned that looking at, power mad C-suite types. Well, first of all, they're generally not power mad, because power is actually an unbelievably unstable way of establishing authority. You get slaughtered if you're not reciprocal in most reasonably functioning organizations. And if you're in an organization that only rewards the exercise of power, the probability that that organization is going to fail in totality is extraordinarily high. Because it's a tyrannical organization, it'll lose touch with its customers. So the C-suite types, they're working nonstop. Corporate lawyers in New York, they make $700 an hour, but they work all the time. And there are people who are suited for that. But it isn't obvious that that's for everyone, or that it should be, or that it's even desirable. Now, it's a temperamental issue to a large degree. Many of those people are hyper-conscientious. And so if they'll work, wherever you put them, what they would do is work. That's who they are. And it's biological as well. It's not all biological, because traits are affected by learning and by environment in complex ways. But a huge chunk of it is that you're born like that. And that has advantages and disadvantages. So conscientiousness is a good example. It's a good predictor of long-term life success. But people who are conscientious tend to tear themselves apart if they become unemployed, for example. Sometimes you get laid off. You worked hard, but you get laid off. Well, people who are conscientious will tear themselves into pieces with guilt in that situation, because they tend to attribute so much responsibility to themselves. And so there's a price to be paid for conscientiousness. It opens you up to a certain set of vulnerabilities. So, and you might be somewhat unbearable to your family too, because all you ever do is work. You think, well, you want to be you want your father, maybe your husband, perhaps your wife, to be a good provider, but you want them to do that at the expense of everything else.
There's that imbalance where someone can be morally good and a fantastic person, but in a materialistic society seem to be a failure because they haven't acquired a great deal.
Well, that definitely is a problem. When you have productive people, that's a problem in how it's a measurement problem in some sense. Economic success is generally associated with intelligence and conscientiousness. So there is a rough correlation between ability, let's say, even moral ability, and success. Now, I'm not making too much of that, but I do know, look, if you're going to be a successful businessman, especially across multiple dimensions, multiple enterprises, you bloody well better be honest, because it's going to catch up with you, man. And the probability that you're going to be a successful crook multiple times is very, very low. You can do that, but you have to move constantly, right? So your reputation doesn't keep up with you. So there is some association between success and moral virtue, thank God. But it's a rough approximation, and there's plenty of exceptions. It's very hard for creative people to monetize their productivity, for example. So you have unrewarded virtue, and that's a flaw of the monetary system. It means we haven't been able to, and you might say the same thing applies to such things as our inability to pay homemakers. Now, why do we pay homemakers? Well, it's because what they produce isn't monetizable for 20 years. And our economic system isn't sophisticated enough to figure out how to pay people for returns that are that, pushed off into the future. That doesn't make it right, but we don't know how to fix it technically, right? I mean, if you're a venture capitalist and you want to invest in something, you want a tenfold return on your investment within a handful of years. You can't afford to invest over a 20-year period, and so that makes it really rough on homemakers because we're not sophisticated enough to monetize it. So it's a measurement problem, but unless you can figure out a better way of doing it, you're stuck with what we've got.